Mr. Walton, did you make contact with aliens? Were you taken to another planet, to a mothership? How did they communicate with... Can you tell me what they look like? Can you tell me how many of them there were? Were you given food?
But the teachers are alive. They're not books. They are the very living essences of nature itself.
What a strange person.
Unbelievably powerful supercomputer that's running our reality, and we don't have a clue as to how to operate it.
So when maybe you or somebody else creates an AGI system and you get to ask her one question, what would that question be? What's outside the simulation?
Say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body, because I am more than physical matter. I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Broadcasting from a shack on a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. We are back. We are live. It's Tuesday night, June the 2nd, and all things are chaos for sure. I've got some stuff going on even miles just north of my house, believe it or not. But this is why we have this little sanctuary here for all of us tonight, so we can go into our hermit holes with our mobile phones or whatever device you may be listening from across the World Wide Web, so you can listen to this show tonight, so we can kind of escape the madness. Isn't that what late night radio is all about? And our guest tonight is actually a lover of the late night. That's what he told me as soon as he got on the air, or as soon as I called him in tonight. So Alan Greenfield's our guest tonight, and this is going to be a pretty interesting topic because it has a lot to do with UFOs, and even I think it's going to get a little deeper than that for sure. But he's here with us tonight, Alan Greenfield, a longtime student of esoteric spirituality, Gnosticism. So the website for reference is thesecretcipher.com. We're going to talk to him here in just a moment. I do want to thank our sponsors at getthetea.com, ancientlifeoil.com, and Metaphorical Archaeology. Please, especially right now, if you're having any type of post-traumatic stress or any type of emotional stress, you can definitely give her a call for those EFT sessions at 214-995-3754. Also, big shout out to UFOseekers.com. We always got to give them a shout out. We love them. And give them a follow on Twitter too, at UFO Seekers. I can't get into my Twitter. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is or what rule I broke. Let me stand up here. I don't know what rule I broke. I don't know what I did. I don't know why they won't let me into my Twitter account. So I've been trying to post on the Fringe FM Twitter when I can. So sorry about that. Now, tonight, our guest, I want to get right into this. I do want to thank the patrons too for being very, very patient with me. That you're going to be glad when everything gets loaded up. Trust me. I got some funny stuff in there too. So, let's get on with this, right? Let's just get into this interview. Alan's with us. Alan Greenfield, a longtime student of esoteric spirituality and Gnosticism, a study that he began in 1960, a past elected member of the British Society for Psychical Research, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, the NICAP, from 1960, and he has twice been the recipient of the UFOlogist of the Year Award. Wow, that's awesome. Of the National UFO Conference in 72 and 1992, which has run continuously on an annual basis for 41 years. He is a Borderland Science Research Associate. He has personally conducted on-site UFO abduction investigations in Brooklyn, Florida, Pascagoula, Mississippi, and Brown Mountain, North Carolina. He considers the UFO phenomenon to be a signal from the collective unconscious that the neglect of a magical spirituality by society as a whole is a cause of an emotional plague and a social disaster. Man, I've never heard anybody talk about ufology that way. That's a very interesting take. Thank you for coming on the show, Alan.
I'm glad to be here. You know, when I first joined NICAP, which is it's 60 years ago, which is pretty scary when you think about it. I was saying, well, I've been doing this for more than half a century, and then you said 1960, and I can count. That's 60 years ago. My goodness. But at the very end of his life, Carl Jung, who, fashioned the psychological theory of the archetypes, was a member of NICAP at that time. So along with a number of other celebs, which I was not. So at that time, I think I accepted the standard, what I call pejorative intended, the nuts and bolts theory of UFOs. But that's been around forever and it goes nowhere, so I was moved to look in other places. And I think you have two simultaneous things going on where UFOs, cryptids, paranormal phenomena, blah, blah, the whole range of things that I see as actually different manifestations of the same other, that is what is not part of our day-to-day world, which is pretty crazy right now, but most of the time is just sort of settled. But the feeling that I have is that you have a complex answer to what actually is going on with all of these things. And my feeling is that one is the way we reach out to it suggests we have some kind of need for these phenomena to manifest. Maybe it's just, burnout on day-to-day existence or burnout on the internet or whatever. It seems to manifest when people have a psychic need. But that's not the total explanation. Clearly, something is going on in the outside, in the otherwhere, as it were, because this phenomena has been going on since, at least since people have been around and able to draw on the walls of caves and showing little creatures that are remarkably similar to the famously little green men, which were never established as men or green. They were little, of the 1950s. And because that has gone on forever and overlaps into fairy lore and giant lore and all of those other aspects of mythology, or what is called mythology, I think that it's probably coming from somewhere else. I had no theoretical basis to say anything other than a term that doesn't really mean any specific thing, other dimensions. What does that mean? I don't know. But I used the term for years, and then along came the theory in theoretical physics of multiple universes and multiple what are called brains. I need to spell that, B-R-A-N-E-S, not like the brain in our head. That's another factor, but these other realities that are right here. They're in they're in your Radio Shack. Oops. They're in my living room. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
But they're not visible or tangible to us under ordinary circumstances. However, in haunted places, in power spots, when invoked in a magical sense or occult sense, they can manifest, or they manifest on their own. And if you're not careful about it, they'll keep manifesting long after you've wanted them to depart. There are ways to get them to depart, but they're there. And those who tune into them have remarkable experiences, sometimes scary experiences. So I had a friend right there in Arkansas, the Light Lines group there. Most of them have passed on because they didn't drink from the fountain of youth when I did. But I shouldn't say that, because it was a famous guy named Rod Dale who was with one of these health food magazines. He was on a TV program and he said, "I'm going to live forever," and he literally died on the program.
My God.
And the host
That's
did
kind of
not
funny.
know what
It's
to do.
dark, but that's kind of funny. You got to admit.
Yeah, and the host was one of those guys who was doing live TV talk shows in the afternoon in the late 1960s, early 1970s, something like that. He said he didn't know what to say. So he said, he looked out at the audience and he said, the classic, "Is there a doctor in the house?" But
yeah.
Mr. Rod Dale was dead as a doornail. So I did not just say that.
Well, it's okay. Like, what, mainly about your research, what I'm very interested in is on your website, you have the secret cipher, which shows a system of gematria. And I'm a bit of a Hermetic Kabbalist myself. So I'm kind of interested in this because I've studied occultism and Kabbalah for quite a long time. And, when you get down to it, and you look at what Crowley got into in that area of when he was bringing in the new Aeon, all of those invocations that he did, he brought into this creature, the lamb of an alien just showed up. Apparently that's what he says. So,
well, it looked, his own sketch of it is remarkably similar to the later cases that are called the Greys. And a lot has been made of that. And I think they're the same thing. I think if you invoke, I have mixed feelings about Crowley, mostly mixed feelings about the organizations that
I do too.
Speak for him, especially since I spent 20 years in one of them, and they made me a sheriff, which is sovereign grand inspector, and I did too much inspecting, I guess, and I did not like what I saw. So
did you go to any swingers parties that were like justified spiritual swingers parties? I bet you did, didn't you?
It's very interesting that you put it that way, because yes, but the fact is that I'm not saying this is true of all locals. There are some very sincere people involved in that.
Yeah.
But, the primary draw of the whole Crowleyan gestalt, if you want to call it that, is sex and drugs. That's just what brings people initially in. Plus, if you've ever been to a Gnostic Mass, particularly a non-barbarous Gnostic Mass, you have a naked priestess on the altar, and everything about it is sexual symbolism. And that's kind of the come on for that particular branch of the universe. So what do you expect? A lot of the people that come in are coming in looking for sex and drugs and probably rock and roll.
Right.
And guess what? Sometimes they find it. The lodge we had here in Atlanta was like that when I first got involved with it, and I eventually became the lodge master there, and it was more, I wouldn't call it straight-laced, but it was by the book, which is very different than in action, and it's a combination of things.
Like Lon Milo Duquette, a good friend of mine, I can tell you his heart's pretty pure when it comes to spirituality and OTO and understanding all these energies and everything, right? But, do what thou will can mean a lot of things. Actually, I'm sure you witnessed that. It definitely can mean all kinds of things. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I have two different views on that. On the one hand, I think that, that is license, and if you scratch it deeply enough, you'll find a kind of spiritual fascism that can play over into something a lot worse.
Yeah.
On the other hand, knowing most of the people that are involved in that and similar organizations, there was that flack 20, 30 years ago about from the what was he called, the Son of Sam killer, that he was a member of the OTO and he was making sacrifices on Crowley's birthday by shooting people.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine people in the OTO being effective enough to do that. The level of organization there is such that they couldn't lead a Boy Scout march on a burlesque house, I don't think. So, when the book Blood on the Altar came out, I went to the author and I said, let me tell you something. You think this is the world conspiracy, and the center of that conspiracy, he names me and he names this other Jewish guy that I don't know whether there was, an undertone there or not, but that guy and I can't stand one another and can't even be in the same room together. So I said, you really need to look elsewhere, because this is a tiny organization with a big reputation, and the initiations have a certain value for a price, but the direction of the organization is not particularly helpful to people, and they're incurious about the very things that I am curious about, having been in the SPR, and I want to know, if magic works, why does it work?
Right.
If it doesn't, why doesn't it work? Is it just is it a claim that some people make? I think that that's something that needs investigation, and I would use the same tools that paranormal researchers, serious paranormal researchers, usually with a string of PhDs, use to assess the veracity of, like, remote viewing and conjuration and all that. I've done some experimenting myself that satisfies me that there is a reaction, and I think it has something to do with the aforementioned other brains. We basically do something that enables the barrier between realities to come apart briefly, and if you're wise, you close it up before you're done.
Yeah.
But
right.
But that's not proof. That's me saying it. What I tried to do with Secret Cipher, the UFOnauts, and Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, now combined, plug, in the complete Secret Cipher of the UFOnauts, and doing very well thanks to the Hellyer people, who are, top of my list right now for people that are doing serious research without the preconditions that have gone into it for a very long time. I feel like I provided the tools that, if people apply the Kabbalistic values that really do come from Liber Alvel Legis, Book of the Law, from one page in it, which Crowley never figured out and apparently spent a lot of time trying to figure out, and which was only cracked in the 1970s by a little group in England headed by the late Jim Lees. And Carol Smith and Jake Stratton-Kent, he's still around. In fact, I think he's rumored to be the chief cook and bottle washer of the OTO in England now, which sort of surprises me, because the OTO has always been kind of hostile to English Kabbalah. But if you use it and apply it the way I did to like the funny names and strange words that show up in contact cases and abduction cases and so forth, it becomes predictive and explanatory. And the reason I produced the book was so that people would have the tools to do that for themselves, and at least convince themselves that if you apply the cipher of the UFOnauts to the to certain cases, or any cases that have, something to work with, a name, a location, whatever, you can predict future places and circumstances and go there, be there, and if it's wrong, let me know. I'll be glad to, negative responses are as useful as positive ones, but I have yet to have a negative response, and that's after, a lot of copies.
Do you carry in the conspiracy realm, there is a negative connotation towards magic as a whole, and to say that there's not is kind of denial, but has it lessened? I think so. I'm curious as to, your thoughts on ritual magic as a whole. I am the same way. I'd love to study it. I'm an occultist myself, but there's always something that's going on with me that wants to understand why it works. So here lately, I've even been studying philosophy and ancient philosophy and the letters that were passed between these philosophers when they're asking all these questions. Because what we call ritual magic today wasn't ritual magic to some of these people back then. It was religion, But when
one of the things that has alienated me for the last 10 years anyway from the, quote, Thelemic, unquote, community, maybe I should make that, quote, Thelemic community, unquote, is the insistence that it is a religion, which my reaction when I first heard that was just what the world needs, another bleep bleep religion. And, right. There are quite enough around that I just don't see that. People will see religious-sounding titles that I am entitled to that are not. They're basically crypto-Masonic titles, and they don't have a great deal to do with. Well, they certainly don't involve any particular belief system. I have relatively conservative religious views, and they're ploddingly, boringly, normal. I sort of keep that as my moral center, and then go outward with questions about the nature of reality and what we can expect from it and what the implications are.
Well, I definitely respect somebody that's actually been involved with it. I got an email today from a guy about Bill Schnoebelen, and Bill Schnoebelen's this guy that's he's totally anti-Masonic, and he tells his Masonic story about how he became a Mason, then he became a vampire, and all this other stuff. And the guy just sells all of this information, but I grew up in Masonry, and I know half the lodges that he's talking about are clandestine anyways. They're not even real Masonic lodges, as far as the lineage goes. And there's so many people that open up lodges and organizations and this and that. And these guys are always, just to let people know, the leaders of these organizations are always in some kind of damn lawsuit with somebody else all the time, trying to fight over trademarks and stuff. It just gets ridiculous. To me, sometimes it just passes the point of understanding,
Well, regular Freemasonry has a good deal to be answerable for itself, in my opinion, and some non-regular, I don't even like using those terms. Irregular and clandestine are both terms that ought to be applied to the little old ladies in the Communist Party USA.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Not to organizations that are ritualistic and don't really do anything of a conspiratorial or negative nature. They're just trying to work things out like everybody else.
Right.
But mainstream Masonry, the story if you're a Mason. Yeah. Most small towns in the South had a Masonic lodge from the year 2, not the year 1, but the year 2, because before television and before the internet, there wasn't that much to do on Saturday night. So you could either go out bar hopping or you could go to the lodge meeting. And I've Never been involved for a variety of reasons that I'll be glad to go into directly, although the OTO borrows so much from Masonry without claiming to be Masonry. Maybe it should, in all honesty. Because,
Crowley does claim that it's a certified. It is certified under the College of Rites as, and he's a real Freemason. That whole story about him trying to get legitimacy with Masonry tells me exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to spread a religion, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And a particular type of religion as well. But he's not the first to do that. I mean, the Illuminati in the 18th century deliberately tried to infiltrate the Masonry of that period in order to, they were more political than religious ideas, but they were trying to spread revolution in Bavaria. While the Elector of Bavaria, which would be like the Duke or King within the Holy Roman Empire, decided no, and they shut him down. But what I was going to say about mainstream Masonry is the average age of Masons is going up every year. Yeah. I mean, there are younger Masons, but the million people that are in Southern jurisdiction, FNAM Masonry, the age is going up. The average age is going up, and the reason is they don't allow women, and up until very recently, they don't allow black folks. So there's an entirely different system, which wasn't even recognized as legitimate Masonry until the Grand Lodge of England more or less insisted if they wanted to still be recognized. So that's my point about a lot that they have to answer for.
Yeah, they definitely do. Especially here in Arkansas. There are other states.
No, it's here. Look,
there are other states.
I mean, you're in the upper South. I'm in the deep
you're in the
South,
deep Georgian
born
South.
and bred.
Well, look up and see if Georgia even recognizes Arkansas anymore for what they've done here, because it's bad.
No,
that's
Georgia
why I walked away from it.
I'll tell you an anecdote, but I'm going to keep names out of it, and it will tell you a great deal about why I am wary of. We're the real Masons, you're not the real Masons, based on whether your ancestors were present in that pub in 1718 or 7, Yep. I mean, that there were a lot of lodges that were not present in that. So, and also I suspect if they were in a pub laying this out on the floor, they were probably drunk as lords. In fact, a lot of them were lords. But be that as it may, that's a very odd standard for legitimacy. Try that with a medical college and see if that works out. I'm not against Masonry. They do a lot of good things. Even the Shrine does, works with injured children, and their charitable work I have no complaint about whatsoever. Their initiation ceremonies, all of which I know, I have their ethical.
Well, what do you think about the oath? Tell me
guidelines.
That. What do you think about the oath, though? The initial oath of an entered apprentice.
I think that if the oaths were literal, they get pretty fierce. They go up the line. If they were literal, then they probably should be in jail, because they're basically saying, if you don't do things our way, by the way, the OTO oaths are the same way, may my body be stripped of its genitalia, and blah, blah, whatever the particulars of a particular oath.
Out. Yep.
Yeah, and fed to the beasts of the field, or the, it varies from oath to oath, but it's, they are blood oaths. I mean, they don't necessarily mean sign in blood, but they are blood-curdling oaths that should not exist, or they should be do what I do when I'm doing any kind of ritual work with someone else, and it involves, like in Martinism, there's an oath that has a particular religious connotation, and I've done it here, I've done it in Eastern Europe, I've done it in Jerusalem, for that matter. I always precede the ritual itself with my own little thing, which is, if you feel that this that the oath in this violates your own personal, ethics or religious values, consider it to be symbolic of the long history of the organization, not binding upon you, because I don't think you can bind somebody to something that they don't believe in. You can make them say the words, but they're not going to be bound to it. I think that part of it is silly and is going out of style and has been for a long time. The same guy that wrote the supposed expose on the OTO later, I think with a little influence from me, Craig Bickner. I better drink a little of my tea. Bickner wrote a book about the various Masonic and Masonic type organizations, and I think he made the point first, which is these organizations had their day when there wasn't anything else to do on Saturday night, but now there's not right now with the COVID thing and curfews and blah, 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 stuff going on in the big city that you probably don't have to deal with in the shack in the back, but
not yet.
I keep hearing the song Love Shack whenever I do that.
It is definitely, hey, when I'm in here, it's definitely a love shack. But,
Okay. Is it a little old place that we can get together?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
But I got to take a break here real quick. When we come back, I want to get into this a little bit more about your Cipher and into ufology especially, because I got some pretty interesting questions I want to ask you about some of these sightings. We'll be right back, guys. We got to take our break.
Feel free.
Have you suffered in silence or experienced stress from a paranormal experience? Even if it happened 20 years ago, when thinking or talking about it today still makes you feel sick to your stomach or makes your heart beat faster, or you suddenly can't breathe. Maybe you even feel those old familiar signs of a panic attack trying to reach the surface. You could have unprocessed emotional responses. Those reactions of terror and trauma are no different than living through a horrible assault, childhood abuse, or a terrible car accident. It can be nearly impossible to find help. The very instance of seeing a ghost or encountering a cryptid could be clinically described as seeing or hearing things that aren't there. You could be considered psychotic, or at best, you're just not taken seriously. Out of a growing mountain of research, the National Institute for Integrative Healthcare showed that 8 out of 10 veterans who completed just 6 one-hour EFT sessions no longer tested positive for PTSD. If you've had paranormal trauma, you can contact Metaphorical Archaeology by calling 214-995-3754. Again, that's 214-995-3754. For a discreet consultation.
All right, man, this is Crow 777, and you are listening to The Fringe FM.
Right, me old Chinas. I know it's an ad break, but before you lot shoot off and make yourself a cup of Rosie Lee or whatever else it is you're going to sling down your Gregory Peck, you need to listen to me babble. If, like me, you found your way to Light in the Void via a downloadable podcast, you might want to take a butcher's at the Fringe FM Wind and Kite. You won't Adam and Eve how many other shows there are or what they rabbit on about. Ancient history, conspiracy, the consciousness, the esoteric, the occult, metaphysics, parapolitical, ufology, technology and spirituality, to name but a few. They got featured hosts like Ryan Gable, Jeremy Scott, Alex Exum, Tim Doyle, Cortana and Gigi, Susanna Ross, the Reverend John Polk, Michael Deacon and J.D. Lewis. You might find yourself listening to the thoughts and theories of the author of The Fish you just finished reading. Or you could pick up the dog and bone, call in and tell everyone your own beliefs or experiences. So do me a favour, before you put on the Ansel or crack open a bottle of vino or roll a joint, go to the Fringe FM and see what you're missing.
From a cave in the depths of your mind, it's Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
Please listen. Now is not the time to fear. When your immune system is strong, shields up. You have very little worries. If your immune system is compromised, you're susceptible to all viruses. I say shields up and no fear. Try Heart Love from GetTheTea.com. Heart Love has a special ingredient called allicin. It comes from the healing part of the garlic plant. No garlic breath, No garlic leaking out your pores, just pure immune-building ingredients that gets your shields up. Heart Love is a unique blend of herbs that loves to build you up. Google garlic and know the benefits. One Heart Love pill is equal to 20 cloves of garlic. 20 cloves! Shields up. You've heard of our Life Change Cleansing Tea at getthetea.com. Now try Heart Love. And by the way, take your blood pressure and watch weekly what happens. So here's how to purchase. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com and build your shields. That's getthetea.com. Mention Ray in the coupon code and hit apply and receive free shipping.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
Hey, I'm J.M. DeBoard, and when I want to talk about dreams, I look up my man Joe Root and his show, Lighting the Void.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight our guest Alan Greenfield's here with us. TheSecretCipher.com is the website. Before the break we were talking about these organizations, Freemasons, OTO. Alan, you got quite of a history with all this stuff. I think that's pretty cool too. So I don't feel like for once, I don't feel like I'm talking to somebody that really doesn't know.
Is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out.
Sorry about that. More commercials coming through. Got to stop that. So for once, I feel like I'm talking to somebody like, that knows what they're talking about when it comes to this stuff. You've been there, right? You've been through it all. You've seen it all. You've been there back through the 60s and stuff. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. What bothers me about all this, and then we can move into the UFO stuff and the Cipher and the Kabbalah, is the fact that it's 2020, and even in my state, I've got people that they don't recognize Prince Hall. They don't recognize pagans. And when you read all of these old Masonic texts, even the stuff about the Egyptians, or you read Manly P. Hall, or you read any of these Masonic books, none of that stuff mattered to them. It was all about if you were a man that came of your own free will. It wasn't about color or what even God that you believed in. You just needed to believe that there was a higher power or a God. That was it. But you don't see that, and it's apolitical now, and to me, it's just stupid. So, yeah, that's why I kind of walked away from it.
It's gone through a number of different, I think that Freemasonry in the 18th century was very esoteric. But as it moved into the 19th century, there was the Morgan scandal, which, a couple of over-enthused Masons took their oaths a little too seriously. This guy Morgan, I know you know this, but just for your listeners, they killed him and dumped his body in Canada. And that created the second largest political party in the United States at that time in the 1820s, the Anti-Masonic Party. And Freemasonry was suddenly in a lot of trouble because a lot of judges, several presidents, blah, blah, blah. So they changed a lot of stuff at that point, in the rituals. And then again, at the time of the Civil War, there was Albert Pike, who was allegedly, and I'll just say allegedly, I personally believe it, he was both living in a Masonic lodge as a religion, but he was also apparently involved in forming the rituals of the Ku Klux Klan, the original Ku Klux Klan. And if you've ever read those rituals, and I've read them, I'm not eligible to join even if I wanted to because I'm Jewish. But the fact is that they are Masonic rituals slightly altered for the purposes of the Klan. And he was like a major influence in Freemasonry. Of course, there were Masonic lodges north and south, and however, the ones after the Civil War, the ones in the South became prevalent. Northern jurisdiction is much smaller than Southern jurisdiction. As I'm not saying anything out of school here. That's generally acknowledged. Each time there's been this sort of challenge, the material has gotten more boulderized. About 15 years ago, the Southern Baptist Convention, and believe me, the number of Southern Baptists who are also Freemasons is, I'm just tossing out a number, 30% of the Masons. Yeah. They suddenly were in Dutch with their church because they were being condemned as satanic, which is not the case. I mean, they have a lot of bad stuff, but they're not conspiratorial, and I would leave that to Skull and Bones and that group that burns things in California and whatever it's called. Yeah. It's not my deal. I mean, conspiracy theories usually lead to the Jews poisoning the wells sooner or later, so I'm very wary of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't know about it, it's just that it gets pretty ridiculous. Anyway, the Southern Baptist Convention condemned Freemasonry as satanic. So Freemasonry, at least in terms of its presentation to the public, became a lot more Christian than it had been because it was open, at least to all white people, all white men, all white adult men, if they believed in a deity, preferably in the deity, as in the deists that founded this country. Like Jefferson and Washington, that was their deal. They were in the history books they're called Unitarians, but I don't think the Unitarian Church goes back quite that far. They were deists. They were ethical deists. And all of that has become much more Christianized in some states. One thing that is good about Freemasonry is that it is divided by state, and it also, there's no ad vitam for life presentations. That's one of the problems that the OTO and similar organizations have. If you're elected to office, you stay in that office until you die.
Honestly, I got to tell you, I get with the political stuff, with all that, I get just completely burnt on it, because when I got in it, it was to learn, and I think just like when I go to your website, I look and see, well, here's a guy that is trying to learn some of this stuff from the Kabbalah, because the Western mystery system is based on this tree. It's based on the Kabbalah, basically. And, we look at these UFOs sometimes, and they often seem to come in and out of existence, especially the amber UFOs, the ones that the Brown Mountain Lights that you've investigated, which I'm curious about your thoughts on that. And the thing about it is like, is this like a really hidden teaching of the Merkaba mystery, where it's trying to really teach us about our energetic bodies, or is this a manipulation of some kind? I think that's what a lot of people are weary of when they look at the Tree of Life and they start getting into the Kabbalah and things of that nature.
Yeah, the rules of Kabbalah are ancient, and the rules apply to various systems, to Hebrew Kabbalah first, and to Greek Kabbalah, and the way I use it to decipher things in ufology, which is the way I hit on that is quite a story in and of itself, but the rules are the same. The difference is that the code book, so to speak, Liberal, is in the English language, therefore English Kabbalah is English, and is frowned on by a lot of, organizations that claim to speak for for the occult movement, which they don't. And I dissent from that, and many other people do too, and I think that's in the process of changing. But you're still using the same techniques for deciphering the inner meaning of texts of any sort if it's in the English language. Some people experiment with other languages, especially those that have a Latin alphabet. It gets harder for Hebrew or Arabic or something. You have to do Hebrew Kabbalah, which is, the numerical qualities that yield the results are different, because you can't fit a 22-letter alphabet into a 26-letter. That's the round peg and the square hole, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work well that way. But what happened with me, if you can indulge me for a minute here, and let me tell you my story.
Sure.
I was, at the same time I was involved with the OTO, I was involved with a informal, non-hierarchical organization called the QBLH, which, is obviously from Kabbalah, that was headed at that time by the amusingly named William W. Webb. That was his real name. This was when the World Wide Web was just becoming available. So he was WWW, and his name was Webb. And he lived at that time when the organization was founded, around 1960, he was living in exactly the area that George Adamski had allegedly had his contact experience, and that even earlier the Jack Parsons and the Scientology guy did their working out in the desert. It's a particular area that is a power spot, and never closed it. So after that, when the flying saucers emerged the year following, this was 1946, the year I was born, and in 1947, the classical, not that there weren't UFO sightings before, but the recognition that came with the Kenneth Arnold case and the handy term flying saucers emerged from that case and went from there. June 24th, 1947, I think may have had something to do with their not closing that gate. In any case, I keep threatening to go out there and close it for them.
Well, do it.
Well, if somebody pays my way, I'm a poor man, I will be glad to do that. Or buy a bunch of books. And
I understand. Listen, it's okay to ask. Your books are good. It's okay. People need to buy them. That's what writers need. They need to be compensated for their work. So, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I was just having that discussion with my girlfriend, actually, and I was saying to her something to the effect that the only thing that I do that involves any exchange of money, because one thing I learned from the OTO is money and spiritual development don't mix real well. Do
you really believe
my
that?
Book, yeah.
You do?
I think that they counteract one another, and it's not like you don't need, if you're building let's say a church or a temple or whatever, you have a certain amount of maintenance, but if it goes back into to the work, then that's fine. If you're taking a profit from it, I feel like there's the temptation to turn into the classical megachurch error or the Elmer Gantry error, and that kills religion.
The one that's always building the new basketball court that they need money for?
Yeah, and it's not all necessarily going to the basketball court either.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of corruption there, and it's when big money comes around, corruption follows, and corruption should never have anything to do with spirituality, in my opinion. But I'm the lone voice crying in the wilderness about that, because I feel like it compromised practically every New Age tendency that has developed. All of these gurus from the East that come here and then collect vast sums of money and buy a bunch of Mercedes. I mean, there's just something wrong with that. It strikes me as fundamentally non-spiritual. And
real quick, I want to say, too, the problem with that is the gurus, even the Eastern ones, and all these people that call themselves spiritual gurus and teachers, that they're leading these people, and these people are striving to be like them. They're striving for perfection. And these gurus are putting on a mask most of the time. A lot of times they have, we have a podcast on the network where these ladies talk about one specifically that was in the East that worked with gurus, where they, do certain types of bad things to women and all kinds of stuff. But they got all these followers and everything, like trying to get everybody to strive for protection. And it's the most sickening stuff I've ever heard in my life, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm pretty down on 99% of that. I think Krishnamurti was for real, but then he, made a big issue out of breaking with the Theosophical Society and moving to Ojai, California, and spending the rest of his life simply giving lectures from home about not getting too involved in any kind of dogma or philosophy. And I'm sure his expenses, but he lived humbly. I mean, he didn't live in a castle or anything. He's just a guy from the East who was, a world teacher and rival of Crowley, who, only in Crowley's mind, who said some very un-PC things about Krishnamurti. But Krishnamurti denounced the whole thing. He said, I have no memory of being part of that. I think what he was saying was, I choose not to have any memory of being a world teacher. I'm just a guy. The rest of them, though, I have seen so many people disillusioned by getting involved with one of those gurus, or with the OTO, or with the AA, or with the Golden Dawn, and then getting, disillusioned. And there's not an infinite pool of people who are willing to, to go through the threshold of these things. It's a big deal for men and an even bigger deal for women. It's a scary thing to become involved in. You don't know whether you're getting involved in, the Kool-Aid cult or, or something that is of genuine spiritual value. And to go through that door and then get disillusioned a year or two later, you're drawing from a pool that is much smaller than the general population, and that's a crime. I mean, it probably is a crime, but it's a spiritual crime for sure. But
I got to tell you, like I was telling you during the break, and I know we keep straying away from the UFO stuff, and I'm sorry, but I was telling you during the break that, I studied Rigardi and Mathers, and I really fell into Rosicrucianism and the Golden Dawn, and the whole history of it. It was beautiful to me. And then kind of, when Crowley separated and started giving away the secrets of the inner orders and stuff, to me, there was a conflict there because Dion Fortune, other people kind of backed Crowley and said, well, everyone has the right to know esoteric information and secrets and then judge it for themselves, which I do believe. But if you're going around teaching people like inner alchemy secrets, especially about sexual energies, and then spreading your idea of what you think love is, it takes away from the sacred part of it. And then everybody wants to sit back and throw their hands up and be like, oh, we got all these pedophiles and we got all this crazy sexual. Well, look, trace it back to where it actually came from. And then if you go like on TV or the Netflix, they got shows where people are like having orgies and stuff and calling it's the Golden Dawn, which didn't happen in the original Golden Dawn. I'm sure there's Golden Dawn orders, out there now that are doing it, but I'm not talking about, I'm talking about the 1888 version,
Yes. Well, the 1888 version was very fortunate to be what they call a fin de siècle, I think it's called. At the end of the 19th century saw a lot of interesting spiritual developments. The SRIA was... Yeah. And the Society for Psychical Research, its first generation, did the best paranormal research I think that's ever been done up until maybe now. But the membership was small. I think the Golden Dawn, the original Golden Dawn, had
really at
its peak 200 members. I mean, they're not secret. And so a lot of them were prominent people. They, right around the turn of the century, that organization fell apart. And as far as my view of it goes, all these organizations that claim to be the Golden Dawn aren't. They could rightly call themselves Golden Dawn revivals if they're following Regardi's book, which curiously nobody was doing that until Regardi came out with what is called in the trade the Yellow Pages, which is this huge book. I'm sure you've seen it.
Oh yeah, the complete system.
I mean, it's all the basic rituals of the first two triads of the Golden Dawn, because the Crowley had already, basically let the cat out of the bag long before. Right. But the notion that somebody who was remotely a low-level member of the Golden Dawn could pass on the Golden Dawn tradition contradicts what the Golden Dawn tradition was about. My view is it was here for a while. It had some dazzling members. Inevitably, there were clashes of personality, and they all went separate ways. A. Waite wanted it to go in a Christian direction. Crowley wanted it to go in whatever he would call his direction. I think scientific illuminism was his first take on it, and then it became Thelema, and that's a different sort of thing altogether. And Dion Fortune, what she was doing is perfectly legitimate.
The Society of the Inner Light, which is a fantastic organization, even to this day.
Absolutely fantastic, but it isn't the Golden Dawn. There are good things in the world that aren't the Golden Dawn. And the best thing you can do is say, I'm in the Golden Dawn tradition, or I'm in the Aleister Crowley tradition. But to claim to be the linear successor of Jesus Christ, which is sort of the claim of the apostolic succession, or whatever, is, that's a debatable point at best. So I think the best thing you can do is do the best work that you can and use the best influences according to your own understanding that you can, and go forward. What I've done for the last dozen years after the OTO and I parted ways was to throw in with a then very small group of people that called themselves first Congregational Illuminists. Then they decided Congregational gave the wrong impression. So it's been Free Illuminism, which is there are no leaders, there's no corporation, there's no money exchange, none, zero. And nobody gets to dictate oaths or dogma or anything else. It isn't even an organization. It is a mutual aid group and of seekers around the world, and now numbering in the high hundreds or low thousands, about the same size as the OTO, I guess.
So
but not a rival of any organization, because it isn't an organization. It's a mutual aid group, as we all need supporters, and that's just fundamental to human nature, I think.
Well, I have to ask you a question just for a small section of my audience that wants to know this, and it's going to come out of left field. Do you think that ETs, extraterrestrials, or what we call aliens, are the proprietors of these secret societies, are manipulating them in some way, or are the ones that have delivered this information to us, either physically or, psychically in some type of manner?
I think at the outset of a lot of these organizations, something that is non-corporeal and possibly non-terrestrial. I prefer the term ultra-terrestrial because I see no reason to invoke other planets. They're seen here and near here. They're seen near the Earth, or, from day one it's been an Earth phenomenon. So I buy into a dimensional type theory a lot more than I buy into when I got involved, they said they were coming from Mars. Well, we're pretty sure now that the only thing that might be coming from Mars is another COVID-19 type thing. And I only rely on how long the trip back is. If they scoop up some dirt and put it in one of those automated spacecraft, I hope that it dies before it gets here, because we've seen what that is like, especially if it's literally out of from outer space. But I do think that you mentioned in the opening that I was a member of the BSRA.
Right.
And BSRA goes back before ufology. It was originally headed by Meade Lane, who was both an initiate and a fan of trans-channeling. And he wasn't himself a channeler, as far as I know, but he found the best channelers of his time. And the theory that organizations initially are founded by the Third Order, as it's defined in the AA, the
Golden Dawn, the Secret Chiefs.
Yeah. They're, I believe, discarnate human beings. That is, they were once human, but they have achieved what amounts to the equivalent of being ready to enter nirvana, but choosing instead to help humanity to achieve greater enlightenment. The term in Theravada Buddhism is bodhisattva, but secret chiefs seems more like a Western term, and that's what I tend to think they are. And I see them influencing little beginning groups now. So I'm watching what probably happened with the proto-Golden Dawn and what happened in the SRIA, and what happened in the SRIA in America, which is still in existence, although diminished, and AMORC. And in other words, I think that, yes, you're correct that they initialize a variety of tendencies trying to get people to develop spiritually, but they abandon those tendencies if they seem to be going in the wrong direction. They don't tell people what to do, but they do seem to withdraw their inspiration if they seem to be, on an ego trip or a money trip or whatever.
Right. I'm sorry, I got to take a break here, but this is exactly where I wanted the conversation to go. So, yeah, we're going to go deeper into these mysteries of the Kabbalah, the secret cipher, and more. UFOs, the Brown Mountain Lights. Alan Greenfield, our guest tonight. We'll be right back.
Listening to The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new paranormal radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the paranormal radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the paranormal radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Hey, this is No Way Jose, a Northern California Piscean stuck in the Arizona desert. I'm a void walker, and I got the shoes to prove it. So what do I do when my soul yearns to delve deep into the realm of the unknown? I aim my satellite straight into the night sky and catch a smooth ride on the KTLK-DB radio waves. I tune into Lighting the Void with Joe Roop on the Fringe FM.
Joe, Lighting the Void is the best show on the planet. This is Barney, your friend from Facebook. Thank you and all the crew for all you do. Namaste, my friend.
This is Macon from the foothills of North Carolina, and I am a Void Walker.
G'day, Void Walkers. This is Lily from down under Australia. The world may be small, the enigma is greater. So let your curiosity take you for a journey with Joe Root.
Hey, this is V, coming in from Central Maryland. And I am a Void Walker.
This is Kevin Doherty, a beginner Void Walker. I'm from Vancouver, BC. I know a little about a lot, and as Leonard Skinner said, I guess the rest. I learned a lot from Mr. Root and the show, and heard it from the beginning. I knew right then he was going to be a new Art Bell. Thanks for all your shows, and keep it up.
Hey, this is Derek from Mass, a.k.a. the Night Stalker, and I'm a Void Walker.
This is Mark from Chicago, and I walk the void to ascertain what is consciousness.
My name is Jared Johnson, and I'm from Humboldt County, California. I do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. I do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I'm a Void Walker. Thanks, Joe Root.
I'm Clyde Lewis. You are listening to The Fringe FM.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Have you ever seen an ad or banner which brought you a feeling that someone is reading your mind or even listening to your conversations? Your online data is being used against you. Surfshark is a VPN service that makes online privacy protection easy and attainable. You can use it on as many devices as you'd like simultaneously. Surfshark encrypts all internet traffic sent to and from your devices and ensures that your IP address remains hidden. The VPN service that we use at UFO Seekers, plus 1 month free for $1.99 a month. Visit surfshark.deals/seekers.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling. The ground shook. You could hear rushing water. And then, history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails. Stores with their shelves stripped bare. ATMs can't operate. Deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand 3 truths. FEMA is broke. The system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in 1 business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
Hey, Fringe listeners, this is Dave Cruz, host of Beyond the Strange Radio, asking you to join us live Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Fringe FM. Visit beyondthestrange.com for links to chat, social media, and schedules of the show. And remember, always stay strange. Hasta.
Paranormal News, I'm Brad Bernards. Scientists found something peculiar coming from the center of the Milky Way galaxy, a previously undiscovered signal they think is coming from the supermassive black hole at the heart of our galaxy, according to Futurism.com. The team of Keio University researchers think that the signal is caused when the accretion disk around the black hole flares up and gives off extremely rapidly rotating radio spots, according to research published last month in the Astrophysical Journal Letters. The flickering signals aren't entirely new. Scientists have previously discovered larger and slower flare-ups, but thanks to the Atacama Large Millimeter-Submillimeter Array, now scientists can detect more minute emanations than ever before. It is only human to look to the cosmos and ponder if there is another Earth out there. Here's Dr. Michelle Bannister, lecturer in astrophysics at the University of Canterbury College of Science.
Every star that you can see with your eyes in the night sky probably has at least one planet. That's what we have the idea of the amount of planets that we have in our galaxy.
Fortunately, while many members of our species have had our heads pointed toward the ground amid the pandemic, astronomers are looking up at the sky. And lo and behold, they found a new super-Earth, the designation for rocky planets more massive than ours, yet with similar conditions otherwise. Salon reports astronomers at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand came across what the lead author, Dr. Herrera Martin, describes as a rare planet which has a similar size and orbit to our Earth and is located near the Milky Way's central bulge of stars. Connect with the news at parabnormalradio.com. I'm Brad Bernards, Parabnormal News.
Somewhere between abnormal and paranormal, there's a show called Into the Paranormal. I'm Jeremy Scott. Hear me live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern on the Fringe FM.
To call Joe, pick up the phone, dial 1-800-588-0335, toll free from the United States or Canada. You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Our guest tonight, Alan Greenfield. Pretty interesting stuff so far. TheSecretCipher.com is the website for reference where you need to go to tonight. If you want to support the show, you can go to lightingthevoid.com. You can donate. You can also join the membership section and get involved with all of the cool Patreon content that we have behind the scenes, the Astral Journal, Outside the Shack, and more. Alan is here with us tonight, and we've talked about a brief history of the OTO, Freemasonry, the Golden Dawn, where all this stuff comes from, and then we just broke into what this study is all about. The Western system is basically kind of all about, based on the Kabbalah. Then there are ciphers within Gematria and Hebrew and English Gematria, which I've had a few guests on talked about that too. I think where I want to go with this is into your studies into the encounters or field investigations that you've done, especially when it comes or pertains to the Brown Mountain Lights. What your thoughts are on those? Or are these interdimensionals? Do they know the secrets of this stuff, or what's going on there?
If they're not interdimensional, they certainly are acting like they're interdimensional. But let me tell you how I discovered that the cipher was applicable to UFO and related research. I had a friend, long dead now, a true genius who had created a computer program to coordinate the English Kabbalah with any text that you cared to run it against. The favorite, of course, was Liber Al, which is where the cipher was first applied. And when it was shown to me by this person, Tim Coutet, my attitude was, wow, that's really nice. He said, well, let me give you a copy of that so you can work with it on your computer. So this is late 80s, early 90s. So computers were not, he had designed this system on a mainframe at night when his employers weren't alert to it. And for all I know, it's still running on that mainframe in upstate New York. But be that as it may, I got it, and I thought, well, this probably has some application to thelemic ideas, and magical ideas more generally. But I wonder if I run some of the peculiar names that are associated with ufology. Strange towns, strange nicknames like Mothman. I mean, he wasn't a moth, and I doubt that he was a man, or is. Is probably more accurate. Or I come from the planet Lanulus, and they always seem to have a spelling for it. Or Albert K. Bender's summoning word Kaik, but spelled K-A-Z-I-K. And I just, as an experiment, I applied it to those, and then using standard Kabbalistic methodology, I was able to derive exceedingly important meanings that were predictive in nature. That is, they would tell you basically, if I had been there in 1953, I would have said, well, you've got Kaic, but I wouldn't use it because you're going to be visited again and scared out of the entire ufology project. And he did, and he was. So I tried it on cases that had no sequel, and it worked very well. So I thought, I need to go back down to my hometown of Augusta, Georgia, and write a book about this and see what happens. And that was the original version of Secret Cipher, the Ufonauts. And while I was on a roll, I wrote a sequel called Secret Rituals of the Men in Black. Secret Cipher, the Ufonauts, to my total surprise, the ufologists who understood a little bit about Kabbalah said, yeah, this works, but I didn't see anybody doing what I had hoped they would do. Buy the book, read the book, and apply it to predicting UFO cases. That was my initial thing. This is 20 years ago. They would understand it, but they wouldn't use it. And the occultists, particularly since I was then a middle-level initiate of the OTO, the Grand Master of the OTO devoted 2 afternoons to personally lambasting me and trying to get me not to do the sequel. Well, I'd already written it, and I'd already sold it to Illuminate Press, but I bought it back, and I sat on it for 10 years. It was called Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, and by the time it came out from a different publisher, I can't recall who I published that with, but that was when I was still a member of the OTO, but I was so disillusioned with it, I thought, let them kick me out, whatever. I don't really care anymore, because clearly this is not a road to enlightenment. This is a road to endarkenment. This is the void. This is putting light on the void. This is putting darkness on the void. So yeah. I was, that came out. And then I was approached by my present publisher, Paranoia Press, and they said, we would like to put out a combined edition under the name Complete Secret Cipher, the Ufonauts. And I thought, well, people read it, they appreciate it, I get a few letters, it sells pretty well, and then nothing happens. What I expect is things that I haven't even touched on. Predictive qualities, analytical properties, the things you would expect with any Kabbalistic system would be done. And lo and behold, that particular edition, it had the right magic, or it was at the right time. This series of programs called Hellyer came out with these people that I had minimal contact with. Greg Newkirk I knew slightly he was a Facebook friend, and the others I didn't know at all at the time, but they did 2 things that I think were great. One was they did a documentary that, unlike UFO Hunters or any of those History Channel programs that they came up with when they ran out of World War II films to show, all of which I have been on, and all of which have very little to do with what they're talking about. Let alone something like Ghost Hunters with there is a sound in the walls. Yes, it's an old house. There are rats in the wall. Give me a break.
Yeah, they hype everything up. Yeah, right.
Yeah, they hype it up, and it's also orchestrated much more than they let on. I kind of exposed that on one of my sites, and I haven't been invited back. I don't know what's wrong. Maybe it's my deodorant.
You probably made somebody angry. That's all. That happens.
I hope so. I did. I don't want to do that sort of thing, but I would do Hellyer anytime, any day, any
Hellyer's
minute.
Pretty good.
And they were very influenced by the Secret Cipher of the UFOnauts, my book. And I said, well, do you have the complete Secret Cipher of the UFOnauts? Because it's two different books under one cover. And they do now. I don't know if they did then, but they interviewed me at length, and book sales have been through the roof for the last, ever since Hellyer 2 was on. And so aside from showing field research as it really is, it also has generated interest in the Cipher of the UFOnauts, and I think that's one of the keys to the extent that the UFO, cryptid, synchronicity, mystery can be understood. They're on the path, and I expect, they being younger people, that they are going to be the next generation of field researchers and analysts, and I think very, very highly of them, and I hope they think very highly of me. So, Mutual Admiration Society, they're doing what I would be doing 20 years ago, which brings me to my work in field investigation and why I have such enthusiasm for their work, because it's very similar to the kind of thing that would happen with me. I sailed up and down the Pascagoula River looking for clues to exactly what had happened in the Hickson Parker case in in Pascagoula, and I had the singular advantage of having investigated the Pascagoula River before the Hickson Parker case, because the river itself was famous because it sings. And Conan Doyle investigated it, and the next person to investigate it 50 years later was me. So I knew the territory. I was still living at home, and my parents liked to vacation in Biloxi, Mississippi. So that's the next town down from actually, it was in Edgewater, which is between Biloxi and Gulfport, but it was blown away in Hurricane Camille, so it doesn't exist anymore. I don't think the town exists anymore. But Pascagoula, I knew very well. I had interviewed people about the river, so I was able to go back, and I already had credible local contacts there, and I talked extensively with Hickson. I've never met Parker, but he seems to have gone through a long period of emotional trauma, which, by the way, speaks well of the case, that a guy would go into hiding afterwards for, 20 years? I think every now and then he says something now.
Right.
Hickson has passed on. But Hickson was a good old boy who wasn't making anything up, and, forgive me, probably was not capable of making anything like that story up. And I had some people that showed me exactly where it took place, and I'm pretty well convinced that's legit. Anyway, separately, and on two different occasions, one I can remember the exact date of it because it was the same day that Apollo 8 went around the moon and came back around reading Genesis 1, and my first reaction to that, having just come down the mountain with Tim Beckley and Jim Mosley, was, oh God, they're stuck in orbit around the moon and they're reading the Bible. But it turned out it was just, their first view of Earth was inspiring, and they thought they would read the first chapter of Genesis on live television around the world.
So how do we get... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
This was December 25th, 1968. And I don't have that stellar a memory, but I do remember when people first circled the moon, so I can coordinate the date with that. I had a Man in Black type experience there, which was really weird. The weirdest part was I didn't think to ask all the questions that I knew to ask, like, how did you know I was here? And what are you doing? But I interviewed the guy who wrote the book, Visitors from Lanulus, and interviewed him extensively. His story is pretty wild unless you're well acquainted with European folklore, because, again, this was a country boy that was rumored to be a moonshiner, as well as running the Outer Space Rock Shop Museum. Ralph Lale was his name. I'm pretty sure he's long gone from these shores. But he said that he was taken into Brown Mountain by the creatures that were manifested as the Brown Mountain Lights for, well, forever. And from inside the mountain, he was taken to the planet Venus, where everybody was naked because it was a hot place, which indeed it is. And these were not people that were native to Venus, which is not a place conducive to life, but from the planet Pewam, I believe it was called. Well, I had a field day with Pewam and the Cipher, but that came later. The story he was telling me rang a bell in my head, and the bell that it rang was, hey, I doubt that this guy has ever seen a Wagnerian opera. In fact, I'm sure of it. In fact, I would bet $100 on it that I don't have to spare. And he certainly wouldn't have any knowledge of the persistent medieval legend of Tannhauser, who was supposedly taken by the goddess Venus into the Venusberg, a mountain in Germany. And he had the classical time dilation. He came out at what seemed like a few days later, but was actually, years later. And he had that the people there had been predictably naked, or it was the same story, but adapted to Brown Mountain. I believe both stories. I think they're both timeless mythos, efforts to understand something that goes on in other universes that is totally beyond our ability to understand.
Claude Swanson would agree with you. Are you familiar with Claude Swanson's work?
No.
Well, he wrote some books about the vortexes and hypertoroidal fields. And, when you look at rituals like the Middle Pillar and some of these rituals that they talk about where you tap into those energies, I mean, I've experienced it myself. I've had crazy things happen after those things, like out-of-body experiences, all kinds of stuff. And when you look at the universe and you get into the sacred geometry of it all, you can definitely kind of see how these fields make up a lot of stuff. It's a fascinating work that he did on that, actually. I'm still reading it myself. But he says the same thing that you are.
I may not have read his, but I certainly have reached the same conclusion that the convergence of ley lines, or whatever you want to call them, are power spots. They show up in a lot of different places. There are well-known ones like Sedona, but there are many others, including the place that I've done all the empowerments that I have done, free for the asking, on Arabia Mountain, which is not in Arabia. It's just south of where I am right now, about 30 miles outside of, it's not outside of Metro Atlanta anymore, because the city has expanded in all directions in the last 20 years. But it's outside of the inner city, Atlanta, and pretty remote, and most people don't even know the mountain is there. So we have it to ourselves, and I have empowered many people there, and over 100 actually. And it's a power spot. It's made of granite and mica and quartz, and has 3 different ley lines that converge on it, one of which runs through the granite capital of the world, which is where the Georgia Guidestones are. And that's a more modern thing, of course, but the tendency is to build things, especially things that have sacred implications, churches, monuments, megaliths, whatever. People don't necessarily know that they're power spots, but they feel it, and they make various uses of those power spots. In any case, to continue, Lael is about, his museum was about halfway up the mountain facing on Brown Mountain, Grandfather Mountain, I believe it's called. And this was a very cold and chill, and the road was getting icy Christmas Eve, and it was Jim Moseley, who was a very famous ufologist in his day and one of my closest friends, his daughter Betty, who was about 10, and I thought, this is really a hell of a way to spend Christmas Eve for a little girl, but be that as it may, and Tim Beckley and myself. And we had been told that if you brave the little narrow road, which is an abyss on one side and a rather steep climb on the other, you can get to the best viewing place to see the lights that you possibly can. So we really went all the way up the mountain with the road being icy, and I was on the side where the abyss was, sort of contemplating my mortality. And we got to the place, and we certainly saw the lights. I mean, there's no question about it. We stayed for a couple of hours. I don't think any of us had a camera. We were gawkers, not scientists that night. But we came back down the mountain, and having interviewed Lael, and I said, if Lael is credible, then there have to be other close encounter witnesses in the area, because that's the experience I've had with almost all of these things, that if there's a primary case, there are a lot of secondary cases. If there's a close encounter of the third kind, then there are at least close encounters of the second kind. You see them up close, but you don't actually get taken on board or whatever it is that you think happens. And I found some people that were absolutely just ordinary folks that had had extraordinary experiences with the lights. One guy that I talked to, this was not that same night, but I mean, you don't just knock on people's doors on Christmas Eve unless you're Santa Claus, right? About a couple of days later, we were there for several days. We went and interviewed this family that the gentleman was a hunter, as a lot of people around, that area of North Carolina are. And he said, well, I was out hunting one night, and there's a big wild area between the mountain that you can view Brown Mountain from and Brown Mountain itself proper, because in fact, back in those days, this will date the era, it was being used by the Green Berets as a training area for sending their special forces to Vietnam. So it's a rough area, same area the Hellyer people eventually visited, and it was also used in an X-File episode where they kind of got eaten by Brown Mountain. That was fiction. This was not. So this guy said that he was out hunting in this what would you call it, jungle, valley, whatever, and one of the Brown Mountain lights, huge, came up to him, stopped, acted as if it was looking at him. Again, it was a
Just a ball of light, kind of?
Yeah, a ball of light. What is that current term that gets used
orb.
a lot?
Yeah.
Orb, yeah, but a big orb. And my mother would have called it ball lightning, but it was not. It was behaving in an intelligent manner. That's what the guy said. He said it stopped, looked at him, he signaled to it, it signaled back to him, and then it went on its merry way. He said his heart was beating 90 miles a minute because he was afraid he was going to get abducted. I guess he knew Lael's story. It was, a famous local story. And we found lots of local cases like that. And these are local people who had nothing to gain and a lot to lose. It's a very provincial area, a lot to lose by saying, oh yeah, I saw him over in Lenore or whatever one of the local towns on different peaks are. So the area is saturated with Brown Mountain stuff. I did another expedition there with Gene Steinberg, who now runs a podcast. This was also late 60s, early 70s, and his then wife, Geneva, and he actually recorded an interview with Lael, which I don't have the recording, but I do have a picture of him doing the interview. But he says to me, publish that picture and I will kill you.
Wow, really? Was he serious? He was serious, huh?
Yeah, well, he looked very different back then. We all did. But I looked better back then than I do now, and I think so did he. But we all have our quirks, and I don't think he would kill me because I'm pretty wily.
Do you feel like that these these beings, the light beings, these extra dimensional, whatever you want to call them, right? We can give them all kinds of names. Do you feel like that they're trying to show us how we can grow into what they're doing? I think a lot of people think that. They think that we're being guided into showing how we can become, our own interdimensional beings. But then there's this other mentality that talks about how we're slaves to a system of consciousness where we're never going to get out of this dimensional thing, right? So there's these two conflicted ideas that I see going on, but the more I study the mysteries and stuff like what you're doing, I feel like it's kind of guided for the person that's really trying to find the answers to let you know that you can definitely become something more than you are. That's what I feel like, but I don't want to get into a pattern of confirmation bias as I go down what I'm studying here. I mean, you could probably tell through my questions that I'm wanting you to say yes, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yes and no. The notion that there's one agenda and that there's one type of being that is manifesting in various ways, whether it's as Bigfoot or goblins or balls of light or alien beings of the gray type, whatever, they don't all have the same agenda. And their agenda, in most cases, probably is something that we couldn't even comprehend. The one thing that is clear from their behavior is they either work by very, very different laws of physics, or they're far, far in advance of our civilization's ability to duplicate. And therefore, the likelihood that we understand what their agenda is practically zero. The way I usually express it is, look, from the standpoint of biological time, it was just a couple of minutes ago that we dropped down from the trees and stood upright so that we could see whatever we were hunting. It was just moments ago. And we have these 5 developed senses that are very good for hunting and conversely for running away, for climbing the tree, for reproducing, but not much else. And yet we have in the last, 10,000 years progressed quite a great deal. But still, with only those rudimentary tools, in terms of geological time, 10 seconds ago, in terms of cosmological time, the time that the universe as we understand it has existed, at least this universe has existed, it's not even a nanosecond in time. How are we supposed to understand something that may have been around for some number that I don't know because it's too high number of years, if indeed the term years has any meaning in these other dimensions, and I doubt that it does. So all you can do is say, is the effect benevolent or is the effect malevolent? If the effect is malevolent, it's something that from our point of view is bad. If the effect is benevolent, then it's something good. If it makes us grow into the otherness, grow out of ourselves into the otherness, it's good for us whether it in and of itself has good or bad intentions. And that's my 60 years of trial and error. That's the best I can do on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good philosophy, and I appreciate you sharing it with us. I'll think that over for a while myself. So this idea that I've talked to quite a few guests about, this idea of a higher self. There's been people that there's a running theme of esoteric guests that have been on this show and through the studies that we've all done here, the listeners, all of us, that there's this idea of a holy guardian angel. Now, I don't want this to be like a Crowley thing and a Golden Dawn thing, because I've seen this holy guardian angel concept pop up in theology. It pops up in the Researchers of Truth, that I believe goes back to the Essenes. It pops up in a lot of things, that there's this one guided angel or over angel or whatever that you want to call it that's trying to help you along. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I got one, you got one, everybody got one. It's the nature of things. And, I'm not saying that to idly. That's based on
experience,
thousands of interviews with people at one time or another.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're externalized and you can see them. Sometimes they're internalized and you can, in a sense, merge with them. And that's what's meant. Crowley said the term holy guardian angel was meant to be ludicrous so that you wouldn't take the term to be the thing unto itself.
Mm-hmm.
Just call them angels. That'll do. Or protective spirits, or whatever term fits your own way of dealing with reality. But it's there all the time, and you can actually call upon it, and it will help you. I have been rescued from the abyss maybe 20 times in my life, and it's always been really, really, really weird stuff. I mean, one time, doesn't matter. I'd rather tell you a Man in Black story, but
please tell me a story.
Simple. Okay, which do you want, Man in Black or Guardian Angel?
The Guardian Angel one would be cool. I'm sure my audience would like Men in Black, though, but it's my show now, so Guardian Angel.
Yeah, okay. All of my guardian angels, for whatever reason, are black people, or that's what they appear
to
be.
Mine, I swear. Mine too.
Yeah.
On everything.
Well, maybe there's a message in there. One time, this one would take too much context, and I'm not sure how much time we have left. Let me see if I can reduce it to practically nothing. My teacher is Michael Berdio of Chicago. That is, I think he's the greatest living magus in the world. And the word magus is not something I use idly. He's also in his mid-80s, so get what you can from him while you can. But he's a gray magician, but he has only been very correct and helpful to me in immeasurable ways. I owe him far more of a debt than I owe the OTO. They owe me something of a debt. But, in fact, quite a bit of a debt. But I'll collect it in the next life, right? my general attitude is that I really needed to see Michael. And I'm walking along the street with my two younger sons, who were then, they were older than toddlers. I would say they were 6 and 8. And thinking about Michael Bertio and these two guys, both of them black, but one with dreadlocks. And I idly thought, probably a Rasta. They're talking very animatedly to each other, walking in the opposite direction from me. And as they passed me, and I'm thinking about Michael Bertio, the guy with dreadlocks turns to me and he says directly to me, Bakalu Baka, which is one of the magical names of Michael Bertio. And then he continues his conversation with the other guy.
Whoa.
And they go on down the street, and I was just, I walked like 4 steps more, and I thought, whoa. But, I didn't go back. You don't want to push it. So I was about a block from home. I get home, make sure the kids are okay, and the phone rings. And it's my friend John Crow, and he said, I have an idea. I just won a round trip for 2 trip to Chicago, so let's go visit Michael Bertio. And I thought, what are the chances? What are the mathematical odds here?
That's not a coincidence at all.
No, it's far beyond coincidence. I'd say it was a 1 in 100,000.
Right.
He won the contest. He thought of me. He wanted to visit Bertio. We did. We went to Chicago on something called private jet, and Bertio gave me some further empowerments, no charge. There's a business that you'll hear things about him, but he never charges for anything. Nor does he do any black magic on people. He did give me a glass of Southern Comfort to celebrate the occasion, and but he's just a really spiritual guy. But the whole experience was set up by an angel, in my opinion.
So
good enough story.
That's a good one, because Candy Sanderson wrote a book called The Reluctant Messenger, and she wrote a second book. And I told her during the break that I had someone save me from the Arkansas River, pull me out of the river, and then completely disappeared. And it was a large black guy, but he was so happy. Like, even when he pulled, like if you pulled a child out of the river, wouldn't you be like freaking out? Like, are you okay? That kind of thing. This guy pulled me up by my arms and was just holding me like a rag doll, like I was nothing. And I was 13 years old. And he's smiling at me and looks at me and he says, he said, you ain't careful, that river will take you away and we'll never see you again. And he's just smiling and laughing, right? And I sat out there all day with trying to fish, because my uncle was a hard case who just wanted to teach us a lesson that we have to eat what we catch, and we wasn't catching anything. And this guy had a bucket of fish, right? When he set me on like my feet, I just kind of like shook myself off. My cousin Jeremiah was like, man, are you okay? I was like, I'm all right. And we looked up and he was gone. And he left that bucket of fish there for us. And he had it was just crazy. Like, he had this brightness about him that's hard to explain,
Loaves and fishes. Yes, that was an angel. I tell you with some degree of certainty. And you may thank whatever you believe in that took place. But again, why would it be? We have that in common. I've heard other people that have these glowing white angels.
Yeah.
There's that. But it's always black folks. The only thing I can attribute it to was my parents were very socially busy, and my father was very businessy and golf busy. So
nice.
I got farmed out to the help, as they would say back then. And the help they were always people who... So maybe I made a link between this is what gives you help, and the angels manifest as what gives me help. What can I say? It's something that it's not a matter of belief. It's a matter of observation.
Yeah.
And it's just there. And, it can seem mundane for a moment, but then what on earth would a guy, really young guy, maybe 18, 20, say to me, one of the few people who would, possibly the only person in Atlanta who would know the term, turn to me and say, Bakalu Baka, and then, go on with whatever he and his friend, probably another angel, or maybe not.
Do you think it's possible that an angel used that man to talk to you, and maybe that man wasn't even aware of what he did?
That occurred to me at the time, yeah. But it doesn't matter. The angel was present, and that was the form that it, whether it used a living human being for that purpose, or whether it was itself totally a manifestation. I tend to think the dreadlocks were an indication this is, a supernatural being. Gotcha. But I'm not going to trouble myself over it. It worked out perfectly. So, in other cases like you, I've had it save my life, possibly my family's life as well, so I just take it with gratitude to the universe.
Exactly. Same here. We got a few minutes left. I'd like you to just talk about real quick, when people go to your website to use the Cipher, what do they need to know about it before they start just plugging in words here?
Oh, please don't just plug in words. It is that website belongs to my publisher, not to me.
Gotcha.
And it's meant to be a supplement. I did suggest it. I said, with the book, the only problem that I've had over the years is that the original decoder that I mentioned that Tim Coutet did, and just will not work on, as far as I know, on any modern computers because, it was a floppy disk program. That should tell you everything you need to know if you've had computers long enough. It's just not viable. But there are now, inspired mostly by Hellyer, I think, 4 or 5 different programs that you can use, and that's one of the best of them. You need to, I sound so much like a plug, but I can't help it. You need to read the complete secret cipher, the UFOnauts, digest it, and then say, what can I do with this? And then go to that page, and you'll have a much better idea of what you can plug into it. It's like, let's say you're a cryptid investigator, and some people report in your general area, I'm making this up as I go along, that there's a local cryptid called the Boggy Creek Monster. Well, that's a real one, but with a funny name. It's a Boggy Creek Monster. Is there a Boggy Creek? Is there a monster?
There is here.
Yeah, of course there is. Yeah, I've seen the movie. You punch in, it has to be a recent sighting. A stale one probably won't yield anything. You punch in Boggy Creek and Boggy Creek sighting, and it'll yield a good deal of information, all of it from Liberal. Now, there are other books that you can apply it to. I had one guy who successfully did some stuff using James Joyce's Ulysses. I thought it was a crazy idea to begin with, but it was good stuff. Anyway, so it will, if you've read the book and understood it, it will give you something to do next, and then next, and then next, and somewhere in there, just like the Newkirks and Associates in the Hellyer series, which I urge everybody to see, 1 and 2 in sequence, binge it, and you'll appreciate it more. They are now friends of mine, but I would, if they hated my guts, I would still sing its praises because It's the way field investigations should go. Whatever it yields that seems to make sense, there'll be a signal-to-noise ratio as there is with, deep space signals or whatever. Sound of the Big Bang, which you don't get on FM, but on AM, you can hear the Big Bang in the background all the time. In any case, and also on TV channels that are unoccupied, some of those dots are from the beginning of what we call the universe. I prefer omniverse because I don't think it's the only one. But it'll lead you to the next step, and as you take the correct steps, or even the incorrect ones, you will have synchronicities which, if you take them seriously, they will guide you on to your next level of development, and then your next level, and then your next level. And if that doesn't happen, be kind enough to get in touch with me and tell me, this didn't work for me. And if it does, which it will, get in touch with me and tell me an anecdote similar to maybe one or two that I've said here. Or better still, get in touch with you. You have the voice of the public. I only have, people that read my stuff, or, God help me, my neighbors.
Well, I've been, we have to get out of here, but it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, I got to say. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. And if you ever want me again, hey, as long as I'm around, here I am.
Well, you know what?
One of the last
we love
of
stories.
The second generation.
Yeah, we love stories, especially ones that are integrated with UFOs, the occult, all of the stuff that you talk about that you've been inundated in. You're pretty much most of your life, it seems like, right? So, yeah, we'll definitely love to have you back on.
It was definitely most of my life. 60 years. I was 14 when I started this stuff. So, yeah, sure. It is really my life. But thanks a lot. You asked the right questions, and you're a really good listener. So I hope your audience fully appreciates you. And I hope they derived a little bit from me.
Yeah, well, we definitely did. Thank you for coming on. And you guys go check out thesecretcipher.com, the website. Grab the books. Also, you can go to the pages too, not just the website, but there are other pages that you can go to, facebook.com/Alan Greenfield author, and wordpress.com/view/Greenfield Samoets.wordpress.com. All those links there we'll leave in the archive. So we got to get out of here. Ryan Gable's coming up next. If you love the show, please support us by donating or going to lightingthevoid.com. Support the show. Join up for the membership. Grab a t-shirt. If you love the network, support the network. Go to the news site at thefringe.fm. Send in your donations. Become an outsider. Big shout out to Pacho, aka Patrick Newland, my producer, the man that makes it all happen. All of you guys in the Fringe FM chat, my patrons, the Fringe FM team. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Good night.